Okay, we are recording. So Dan is going to give us kind of an update, an overview of what the Ag Mechanics CDE is going to look like. I apologize, I am in a car, so I apologize if there's noise all around me here. I'll try to keep my mic off, but all of these are recorded, and I'll put the link up here in the chat in a few minutes, but they're recorded and available afterwards. All right, Dan, the guru who knows everything about Ag Mechanics, you're up. No pressure.
Well, the more I learn, the more I don't know, but isn't that the way everything goes today? We'll kind of go through the different parts. Still trying to finish up and get the final copy of the test to Doug so he can get things ready and score sheets and all that. First part I'll go through is the small engines this year. We have two parts of that. One's a 25 question test, and it's just over basic fundamentals of lubrication, ignition, compression, governing, carburation, typical questions. And then there's a 25, the practicum is 25 parts or tools to identify. And just like this would be a piston. And so they'll be laid out on the table, and we move through them. Each part for the individual is 15 minutes. So they have to go through the 25 parts in 15 minutes. Another one would be an armature. And of course, I remember it's got an arm on each side. That's one way to remember that. And as far as tools, compression gauge that you would screw into the spark plug threads, and it would read a compression when you turn the cylinder. Another example would be a spring compressor. And so these are laid out on a table, and the students move along and try to identify those. On the website, there is a master list. And the intent is you could actually download that and use it for practice. When I taught high school, we laid out tools and parts on a bench, and students would walk into the classroom, but they'd go through and could self-check themselves. I had a name card they could flip over and see if they knew that. It was pretty simple repetition. And seemed to work pretty well for our situation. And if anybody has any questions as I go along, ask, and we'll try and answer them. That's a pretty simple, straightforward part of the CDE. Another part.
Hey, Dan.
Yes, sir.
Just for clarification purposes, so there's 4 on a team, and each one of them are going to rotate through. I mean, it's not, because at our district contest, we had someone that was on small engines. We had another person which was electricity. We had another one that was arc welder. That is not the case at the state. They all have to go through all 4 components, correct?
Oh, there's 6 individual components. And then there's one team activity where they all work together on the team activity. So there's 2 in electricity, 2 in small engines, an operator's manual, and a piece of equipment to look over and answer questions. And then the team activity. And the scores from the team activity are equally added to all the team members. Does that make sense? Okay. So the next part.
Dan, I've got a question for you too.
Go ahead.
And I'm glad you showed that piston because it made me think of this. If you've got that piston there sitting on the table, how are the kids supposed to know if that's a piston versus the piston top flat, which is on the list? Will there be something that's like pointing at the top of the piston that to tell them they need to identify that as the flat top piston? Does that make sense?
Yeah, I understand that.
Because to me, I just call it a piston, and that's what my kids would probably do too. But how would they need to know, or how would they know?
Well, this one is dished out. I don't
Oh,
know
it
if
is. Okay.
you can see that or not. So yeah, that's, I run into that on my students here. And I guess I hope I prepare them ahead of time that they get the right piston.
Well, I guess my question is, how do they know, how will they need to know if they need to identify the top of the piston or just piston? You know what I mean?
I know what you mean.
They're both on the list. I mean, if it's supposed to be just the top of the piston, will there be like an arrow pointing on it or a note that says identify the top of?
We can do that, yes,
Okay.
yeah.
Okay.
To be honest, I've never done anything but just a straight flat top piston. In all these parts of the CDE, I don't think we've had anybody ever just ace it, any of the components individually. So I don't get too technical on the variations.
Okay.
But that's a good question. We can put the mark on there and try to highlight that if necessary.
Okay, got it. Thank you.
Good point. Good point. Okay, another two-part would be the electrical, and there'll be a 25 question on general electricity and wiring. And the questions are all written multiple choice, both for the small engines and electrical and the operator's manual and the equipment observation. Okay, and we're going to put probably 5 questions on DC components this year. Like what does a resistor do? What does a capacitor do? And those are also used in AC, but I want to start building a little education into the microcircuits that you might find in, well, a center pivot control panel on a sprayer, electrical under the hood of a tractor or any kind of a mobile equipment. More and more electrical components are becoming almost more comprehensive in mechanics than turning a wrench. I have a person on my advisory council that says in their dealership, 75% of their repairs are electronic. That means only 25% are actually turning a wrench and replacing or repairing a hard object. So kind of trying to move a little bit, not just the AC residential wiring, but a little bit into some of the components. Turn around again. Typical textbook, most of them have a chapter on DC components. And that's kind of where I'll pull my questions out of. That's an Elmer Cooper textbook. There are couple others. So again, my idea is not to stump the chump, but to try to broaden and test the knowledge of general knowledge. Okay, the practicum on electrical, see if I can hold this up. Each contestant is given a board like this with 3 boxes. And the first wire initially is fastened into the first box. They're also provided 2 12-2 with ground wires, 16 inches long, and 4 wire nuts. Okay, So what they'll do is they'll wire. And if you can see the diagram here. So here we have some electrical symbols, and they'll wire a switch to an outlet to a lamp. Thank you. And so far I haven't, in 5 or 6 years, have not changed that sequence. Again, nobody's ever, well, one person almost aced it, but they did too much. But we're just trying to get the basic knowledge of reading the symbols, reading the instructions, and doing the actual wiring. On the switch, you got 2 gold screws. Black wire goes to gold screw, one in and one out. The white wire, then you're going to wire nut together. And although we have a metal box, we're just going to wire nut the grounds together. We're not going to attach the box to the ground wire. Same way in the second box, we have 2 gold screws. So a black wire in and a black wire out. And on the silver screws, a white wire in, white wire out. And again, we're going to wire nut the grounds. We're not going to fasten them to the box like you would actually do in actually wiring. But the idea is for this competition to make it that we connect them, but we don't necessarily ground the box. So we're a little out of code, but we are trying to emphasize that you don't just leave them loose in the box. On the lamp then, you have a silver screw over here for the white wire and a gold screw for the black wire. And then that's where the 4th wire nut goes. We just put it on the ground rather than having it just hanging in the box. We ask that students do not, if I move these. Do not tighten the clamps into the boxes. We try to have them open equally for everybody before the event, their turn. But we don't want them tightened up because that takes longer to undo it and get it ready for the next group. So we have 20 of these set up for a group, and we have 20 that we bring in for the next rotation. And we take the first 20 apart and try to get them ready for the next rotation. So we don't want to have too much to take apart. So we don't tighten these, and that's in the instructions. And the instructions also say not to fasten the ground to the box, but we do want to wire nut it. Any questions on that practicum? The switch, if it's completed, is worth 10 points. The receptacle, 20 points. And the lamp, 20 points. No, I think that's switched around. The switch is 20 points and the lamp is 10. For a total of 50 points, and then we deduct for code violations. If there's too much of the yellow Romex inside the box, more than a 1/4 inch, we deduct for that. If it's not showing in the box, we deduct a point. If the little paper and cardboard is showing, we deduct a point for that. That's flammable. If there's too much copper showing around the wires, around the screw, we want the insulation up to the screw, but not more than 1/8 of an inch away from the screw or under the screw. Are there any nicks or cuts in the insulation? We deduct a point for each one of those. The wires should be counterclockwise. No, the wires should be clockwise under the screw. So they're deducted if they're counterclockwise. We want them to be the same direction as you would tighten the screw. And are the wire nuts secure? If we just give them a tug, do they stay put or pull off? And code says there should be 4 to 6 inches of wire inside the box from each direction. Minimal and maximum. So we kind of look at that to see if they're getting enough back to go inside the box, but not too much and not too short. Any questions on the wiring?
Dan, do they need to bring any supplies with them for the practicum?
Yes, I was just going to share that. Need to bring, and preferably for each individual, safety glasses and probably a Phillips screwdriver and a wire strippers, tool, pliers. Those 4 items. So we do request that they bring their own, and preferably for each individual. We try to rotate and divide schools up so they're not more than one person in a rotation. But occasionally coming out of the team activity, we end up with 2 from the same school in a rotation on electrical, and they need to each have their own set of tools. And so it's easiest if they bring a set for each team member.
Dan, I posted or pasted into the chat there the list of required supplies and equipment. You didn't list all those things. Can you just clarify? You can look at that chat right there to, if there's anything there they don't need, I suppose. That's directly from the rules.
Calculator, wire stripper, flat screwdriver, Phillips, needle nose pliers. Yeah, that would be good. I'm sorry. Diagonal cutters are useful. Small center wrenches. No, we don't need those, or the sockets. So the wrenches are not necessary. And then, as you pointed out, no knives allowed for stripping wire. And that's a PBA requirement as much as our own. And, you know, that follows general school policy also. Yeah, that looks good. Appreciate that, Matt.
You said the
Thanks, Dan.
diagonal cutters are required or just nice to have?
They're nice to have. If they've got good cutters on the wire strippers, you know, they might have to cut the wire back. That's their choice. So diagonal are not required, but they can be handy to have. They're just a little more, little stronger. Okay. Any other questions on?
Can they use a cable stripper to get the insulation off?
Yes.
Okay.
And there's some different variations. I have one that clamps around the wire and then has a tooth in it. I find the tooth sometimes nicks the inside wire. Also, there's a pliers kind of thing that's a wire stripper. And I don't have any of those, but there was somebody at a contest 3 years ago that had a couple of those. And those look like a pretty nifty tool. Any other questions? Good questions, everybody. Appreciate that. Okay, on the team activity, well, I'll go the individual yet. Okay. For the operator's manual, we're going to use a conveyor. And I have found, and this says Jorgensen, This is a Dynex. This is an Orthman. Here's a Continental and a Cab, and there's several others. So we will use one of those brands for, or maybe a different one, for the operator's manual. And what I try to have the contestants look for, one is to use the table of contents and the index to kind of zero in where they need to be. And I don't print the whole manual. There's some, the one is 8 pages long, and there's one that's 234 pages long. So I pick one roughly about 20 pages, or I'll leave unnecessary pages out. Things I'm going to ask questions on are safety, maybe decals, maybe guards, shields. Another thing would be adjustments for speed, mostly speed on a conveyor, but also to keep the belt maybe from riding to one side or the other. And it could be a chain conveyor too. Another one would be maintenance and service. So where are the grease zerks? Also under adjustments could be for speed, to speed it up, slow it down. How do you adjust for that? One of the skills that I like to encourage at the high school level is being able to interpret charts. So if you've got a certain size and you want a certain speed, you read across and match the boxes up to find that. Also looking at diagrams. We had a feed grinder a couple years ago, and it was one on finding the right size of screen for a certain grain, specific grain. Again, not just in the reading, but also in the diagrams and the charts, trying to find and locate that information. That's a skill from my experience as a teacher that was kind of lacking at the high school level. And we need to help students learn to interpret those diagrams. Okay, so, and then kind of the same thing on the piece of equipment. 5 years ago, we had a forklift, and we had students identify tire pressure, which cylinder was leaking, was what kind of fuel did it run on? Was it electric? Was it diesel? Was it propane? If there was a fork bent, what was the safety decal on the dash? Just good observation skills that they have to look for. So we got the operator's manual and the equipment, observation, electricity, and small gas engines. And there's a test and a practicum with those last two, the others, and the questions are all multiple choice answers. Generally, individuals will get done with plenty of time. And again, they just hurry through sometimes. And if they took a little longer or went back over, they might catch a question that they missed before. Okay, the last component then is the team activity. And I don't have it all written yet, but I'm looking at loading a trailer with pallets of materials. And so we may take a 4x4 pallet or 3x3. How many can we get on a certain size trailer, flatbed trailer? Might have to look at how many pounds, and we have maximum tonnage on axles of a certain weight. So students or the team will might have to convert pounds into tons. And then I intend to use a loading conveyor to put these pallets on the trailer. And so there's okay, so they got how many pallets could they put on for square feet, weight? And then with the conveyor, would be a gear ratio of how to speed up the conveyor or how to slow it down. And is this backwards, Stacy? Or anybody?
Sorry, no, it's not backwards. It looks good.
Okay, well, it's backwards on my screen.
Okay.
But anyway, on pulleys, the diameter of the pulley times the speed will equal the diameter of the next pulley time and give you that speed. And it's just pretty much simple algebra. If you know 3, you can find the 4th missing number. With sprockets, it's the same thing, only you count the teeth. So if you have 6 teeth here at a certain speed and it's the same speed, you would have 6 teeth here. If it's a different speed, you might have a different number of teeth on the driven sprocket. So there at the bottom, the big D or little d equals driven and drive for the pulley. Big T, little t is the number of sprocket teeth. And it's just simple algebra. Your students say, when would I ever need to have algebra? Well, right here's a good example of you know 3, you find the 4th. And it can work either direction, either to the driven side or to the drive side. It can be the RPMs or the number of teeth or the pulley diameter. So there'll be a question of, okay, the conveyor's moving at this speed. This is the number of teeth on the sprocket. How can we speed it up? To get a desired RPM to move the conveyor at a faster speed or slower speed if we were slowing it down. Any questions on that?
Yeah, Dan, could you go over that team activity again? You had number of pallets, conveyor speed, and what was the other thing you might talk about?
The gear ratio.
I thought there was one number of pallets and did you say like ton?
Oh, weight. So if you have 2 7,000-pound axles, how much weight could you put on that trailer?
Thank you.
Yeah, no problem. Again, kind of useful calculations, the gears and sprockets, belts, planter drives, big baler speeds. That's pretty applicable in a lot of situations. So hopefully that it's a little bit more of a mathematical, but it's an applied mathematical component as a team activity. Okay, I don't see any other chat questions. Oh, let's see. Nope. Okay. Okay, just background. Okay. So I guess we're about used our time up. Are there any other questions? Again, I try to write this into a practical competition of knowledge and skills students might actually use in a career. It may not be totally transferable to everything into the national contest. I'm writing it hopefully for Nebraska. And the team that wins then has 6 months to get ready for the national and look on the website and prepare for that. What clothes should they wear? We would prefer a collared shirt, not a t-shirt. They're going to be doing a little bit of looking around on the piece of machinery or equipment and doing the wiring activity. Blue jeans would be adequate for that. But not with holes. We don't want frayed material in a shop. Those could be hazardous. So we want to kind of send a good usable working image for safety. And then another thing on the electrical, backing up to that, we use a 12-2 with ground. I did mention that, but that's a little heavier wire than like a 14-2. But I want students to kind of remember that. That's what we used in the contest. They're able to work with it. That gauge of wire is pretty safe for a lot of residential applications. You get into lighter wire and you might have some overheating and some possibility for fire accidents that way. So we use the heavier wire that I want students to remember further down the line, I guess, when they're trying to think about it and be used to working with it. Any other questions? Asked some great ones today.
Dan, if I could just throw,
Sorry, we'll go to Matt, and then we'll see if anybody else has a question for Dan at the end there.
just to be specific, official FFA dresses is not recommended. So they're not going to get banned if they show up with it in this event, but that is not recommended.
That's true. That is correct. We want them to look good, but they don't have to be an official dress.
You do want them to wear the FFA jackets though?
No, they do not have to.
Looks like Monty has a question about a multimeter being allowed for the electricity portion.
Not necessary. Not necessary. We're going to do a visual check. Are things wired in the correct sequence? So they probably don't need a multimeter. We're not going to use one in the scoring.
Monty, does that answer your question? Matt, do you have any general CDE information?
Yes, but before I do that, I wanted to let Dr. Doug Smith, he is a co-superintendent with Dan on this. We really appreciate everything NCTA does. Dan kind of covers, as you can tell, all the technical aspects, and then Doug and his group of ag ed students do a lot of the registration and scoring aspects. Doug, what would you add to this?
Everything has been pretty good so far. Each team really is, 15. We will break up, every student will not be in or should not be in the same group as a teammate. So in the past, we've had some sharing of tools, but ideally it makes things easier if each student has their own tools. So we will, once everybody's registered, then we'll take a group, start the team activity right away, and then we'll swap out. So students should be in good shape to be ready to go as soon as we start the contest. We'll have, like I said, 15 minutes per station, except for the team activity where they'll have 30 minutes.
Doug, how early do you want registration to show up before the CDE?
I think it's on the schedule, and it tells you, it's about 30 minutes prior to the start of the contest.
That way we can get everybody checked in and
Right.
make any substitutions that.
Yeah, if you have make sure as you've done your entries that you have put in, have the alternates in there, so you can use the alternates from the alternate list. Otherwise, you cannot use anybody. You just can't add them.
Good reminders. And you're right on the schedule. If you're in districts 1 through 6, this is 2022 that we're recording this, but if you're in districts 1 through 6, the event starts at 9:30, but you should be dropping off your students at 9 o'clock. Districts 7 through 12, you need to drop them off at 12:15, make sure they have lunch beforehand, and they'll be going, moving through their sessions and things by 12:45. This event also does not take place on East Campus. It takes place at the Pinnacle Bank Arena, and it will be the place to drop them off isn't the front of Pinnacle Bank Arena. It's actually in the back on the north side. If you drop them off in that lot right there, there's a door that says marshalling over the top of it, and students can enter in that back door. And the first face they're going to see is Doug Smith and the Ag Ed students from NCTA, and they'll get them where they need to be from that point. So again, the marshalling door on the north side of PBA, it's right by the loading dock is where it's at.
And I'd like to say I couldn't do it without Doug and his crew. And I do have the center pivot technicians do the electrical scoring and resetting on the wiring boards. It's a neat application of their skills that they learned as part of their certificate program here. And it's a neat thing to add to their resume when they go look for a job as a technician, that they helped with the electrical component of the state ag mechanics. And also at our boot camp in the summer last year and planning for this year, we do some wiring activity, some small engines activity, some hydraulics activity for the attendees in that part of the boot camp. So just putting a little plug in for that toward the end of June. And there'll be other topics available on campus at that time as well.
That's great, Dan. Yeah, Dan does a lot of work along with his students out of his department, and then Doug and all the Ag Ed students from NCTA, and it takes a lot of work, but Dan's right. If you are interested in getting better at this event as a teacher, the boot camps that NCTA will be putting on this summer will be great opportunities. So look for that information going out of the listserv. Also, this event has a $40 team fee associated with it due to the supplies it takes to make this thing work, and also it helps compensate for, I think, some of the travel expenses for the students and things to come and put on this event too. And so if you're wondering why this event has that, it's because it's an expensive event to put on, but Dan and Doug and their students make sure it's a quality event at the same time. So looks like Doug put in the chat, the June 27th through July 1st is the Ag Teacher Boot Camp. And what are the topics that you all will be doing through that time? You said electricity and...
Well, for the ag mechanics, last year I did electricity, hydraulics, small engines. I wanted to do some DC electronics and we didn't get to that. But I kind of let the group that's here pick a little bit, and I'm ready for a whole variety of topics. And along with that, then I give some tips like for the CDE of some little tricks. So that's a carrot to attend the boot camp. Get those little extra tricks that can help you out. But
if you're interested in graduate credit too, I think we're working together on that, and I think there's opportunities for that as well. So a lot of good reasons to go out to Curtis in June.
Yeah, and I think we've got a Delta leadership conference later this summer.
No, that'll be next summer.
Oh, it's a year out.
Yeah, Delta we're pushing off to 2023. As Doug notes in the chat, there's other topics this year beyond the boot camp last year. They're also adding topics for ag business, agronomy, livestock, and equine. And so they're expanding the boot camp. That's all I had, Stacy. I don't know if
That's
there's
it.
anything
Okay.
else. Yeah.
Any other last questions for Dan or Doug?
I'd just like to commend you, Dan, for the quality of contest you put on. My 4 students just left the room, and I told them this is one of the most hands-on contests, I think, during the state convention, and it's you always provide professional development. So thanks for everything you do on your end to make this a real contest for students. I really appreciate that.
Well,
Agreed. Thank you.
I appreciate that. There's a lot more I'd love to do, but we're doing what we can. You know, it's 200 miles or more to transport materials and people, and it takes a little bit of organization to get it together. And certainly my experience of 20 some years in the classroom at the high school level, I know what you guys are going through. So I try to keep that in mind as I set things up and get ready for what we try to do. And I try to benefit the agriculture industry for Nebraska as well.
Right. Thanks, Doug. Thanks, Dan. Thank you all for joining on. I'm going to stop the recording, and then if anybody has any final questions that they didn't want recorded, feel free to ask.